Myanmar, the country is under the control of a military regime which has restricted access to websites and social media. So that means, along with power lines being down, it is difficult to get information out of the country. Well, our correspondent Caroline Hawley has been working with the BBC's Burmese service and BBC Verify to try and piece together the full scale of the disaster.
Buddhist monks cower. Caught between collapsing buildings. On the tarmac at Mandalay International Airport, you can see a plane sway from the force of the earthquake. Terrified passengers don't know what to do before they're directed to move further away from the building. In Myanmar's second largest city, there's panic on the streets. Mandalay, 10 miles from the epicenter, is home to 1.5 million people. Buildings dangerously disfigured and fallen in on themselves after the earth moved beneath them. This woman's trapped with her baby boy. Her legs are caught under rubble on the ground floor of a damaged building in the capital, Naypyidaw. A painstaking effort to get her free. We don't yet know the real scale of this disaster, but hospitals have been inundated with the injured. Brought in not by ambulance, but in whatever transport they can find. Treated on the street in the heat because of fear of aftershocks. So many wounded, the authorities have appealed to the public to donate blood.
While I was doing the housework, I felt shaking. It was very strong. I was afraid that the building would collapse, and as I went outside, I was hit by a cabinet that fell on me.
A high-level visit to the hospital by the internationally isolated military junta. The needs are so great that it's made a rare appeal for outside help. We want the international community to give humanitarian aid as soon as possible, the spokesman says. The damage has been indiscriminate. They watch in horror as a pagoda in Mandalay comes down. Cultural jewels, along with basic infrastructure, have been destroyed. And many areas have been cut off, with roads concertinaed and cracked, and the power and internet down. And that's just in territory controlled by the military government. Information from rebel-held areas, already reeling from recent fighting, is harder to come by. The earthquake was felt hundreds of miles away. In southwest China, a glimpse of its ferocity and the fear that accompanied it. The aid effort in Myanmar will be complicated. Regardless of religion or politics, the hope is that the help now being mobilised by the UN will be allowed to reach everyone. Tonight, a rescue worker in Mandalay told the BBC that many people remain under the rubble, and with little equipment, they're digging for survivors with bare hands. Caroline Hawley, BBC News.
Well, joining me now to discuss the response is Eleanor Raikes, Vice President for Programme Delivery at the International Rescue Committee. Eleanor, thank you for being with us at this very difficult time after this terrible earthquake. Just bring us up to date with what your colleagues on the ground are seeing, are reporting.
Yeah, thanks for having me. As you just saw in those images, I mean, this is a very significant earthquake, very significant emergency in a very complex context, very difficult to access. The epicenter of the earthquake is in an area that will be hard to access for many reasons. We know that the death toll is rising by the hour. And we expect that this catastrophe is going to create thousands more people will be displaced from their homes. And that is on top of a pre-existing crisis. So that's what makes this so particularly difficult and challenging. Myanmar, before this earthquake, had nearly 20 million people in humanitarian need, 3.5 million people displaced. And really suffering from widespread violence and severe disruption to basic services.
You talk about that complex crisis that already exists, including displacement, and I just immediately think about the risks of aftershocks and what happens to those people, for example, if they're trying to flee from that potential when they literally have nowhere to go to?
Yeah, and I think the worry is that it's going to be weeks probably until really the full scope of and scale of the impact is going to be known. We know that transportation lines are compromised. The highway between Yangon and Mandalay impacted. Airports impacted. Basic infrastructure, which even before the earthquake was there were often interruptions of electricity, only going to be worse. So accessing, search and rescue is the immediate priority, of course. Accessing people immediately impacted by the earthquake, but then providing services for the thousands, tens of thousands of communities that are going to have been impacted by this, that are going to be living in areas where, as you say, aftershocks are definitely a serious risk.
Yes.
Going to be a very complicated crisis to respond to.
And Eleanor, you started to allude to it, but of course this is a country that is ruled by a military junta. It is isolated from the outside world. So what does that mean for you and your teams in terms of getting aid in, getting humanitarian workers in? Are there political barriers?
So we have a large team in Myanmar, and our local teams were on the ground today assessing needs in the areas that they could access so far, and we hope to be able to continue to do that in the days to come. And we have big programs that deliver health and emergency assistance, and we'll be scaling that up to respond to this crisis in the weeks to come. But as you say, Myanmar is a crisis that is not in the headlines very often. We publish every year a watch list of the countries where we predict the greatest deterioration of humanitarian need, and Myanmar was ranked 3rd this year. So it is a very serious crisis, even if it's not often in the news, with, as I've said, very significant numbers of people who are displaced, and very stretched services, health infrastructure, other basic services already very compromised, very impacted by the widespread violence and conflict that
Right.
Unfortunately prevails in the country.
Briefly, if you don't mind, you just mentioned the fact that Myanmar, even before this earthquake, was ranked 3rd on your watch list. What is needed from the international community now?
Well, unfortunately, the other issue that the aid sector is facing is shortage of funding. I mean, and Myanmar has a humanitarian response plan for 2025. 4 months into the year, it's less than 5% funded. So the amount of resources that are available to respond, even before this earthquake, were very limited. And I think that's what's needed. We need to get resources into the country. We obviously need to work all together as an international community to get access to make sure that people who have been impacted by this earthquake can have the means of survival in the weeks to come.
Eleanor Raikes, Vice President for Programme Delivery at the International Rescue Committee. Very good to have your insights. Thanks for being with us.